Hi there. Oh, that's a bit of a flat-looking sign. um, Categories of human thought. I just briefly go over these, as far as I understand them, anyway. And starting with the naughty stuff. If I look around me at present time, and of course this has always been true, actually, and it's true of me and you as well, is that there are five poisons to human society and to human progress. And these are, just to briefly explain these, ignorance. Ignorance is when you can't see that there are two sides to every question, or perhaps many sides to the same question. Your thinking is what they call black and white. So I'm on the side of the white and you're on the side of the black. I am right and you're wrong. And there is no extenuating circumstances to that judgment on others. But that really just reveals the ignorance on your part, that you're not prepared to see the world in any other way apart from your own. And I know we're all guilty of this. Perhaps it's an inevitable consequence of being human. The other thing is illiteracy. This is when you don't either you don't actually read what people have actually said, or even if you do read it, you sort of skip ahead of it or skip along, skim reading without actually comprehending what it is you've actually read. So you don't actually know what it is in fact you've read, and you don't actually know what people have said. And this goes on well on threads, posts, Facebook, Twitter. People don't actually read what the person has posted. In fact, and if they had read it properly and understood it, they wouldn't take umbrage at what was being said, because in fact it reflects very much their own opinion if they would bother to actually find out what the opinion was that they supposedly disagree with. You come across that many times, and probably you're guilty of that as well. Illiteracy, I know I am. Indolence, so it's when you can't be bothered to read stuff. You can't bother to read books or posts or anything really. I find it difficult to read stuff now because of my poor eyesight. But I have got a reader which I never use, which I think is significant as well. It's like remembering people's names. You can't be bothered to remember people's names. You can't be bothered to remember, you can't be bothered to find out what people have said, read their actual book or books or whatever. And you say there's not enough time, but you have enough time to spout off about things you know nothing about, instead of finding that time to be constructive in your criticism because you've actually read what the person has said, and therefore you have grounds to critique them on, you see. And finally, there's ill education. That's when you basically don't know any facts. Or you just say facts are values, and that means you can reject all facts as being values or valueless. I don't think Friedrich Nietzsche actually wanted people to reject facts. He was pointing out that facts have values underlying them, but that doesn't mean to say that facts are valueless, which is what a lot of people took him to mean, in fact. So they don't bother about any facts. And then finally, on the basis of ill education, illiteracy, indolence, ignorance, there is impulse, which is the fifth poison of our society and of societies generally in the past and perhaps also in the future. People act on impulse. They act on the fact they don't know what they're talking about and don't know what a fact is, and condemn people out of hand, and this come and then just all go around doing stuff. And I'm not going to talk about anything in the current news at the moment because it'll all repeat itself, repeat and rinse and repeat. This is all comes in this all results in so-called magical thinking, believing that something is true without any supporting evidence for it. And of course, we have different types of magical thinking. We have conspiracy theories. I mean, that doesn't mean to say that governments don't lie. They most certainly do lie. But sometimes I think they lie because they don't want to tell us, they don't want to scare people, and don't want to set up a complete panic or run on the stock market. But I think I'm more of a believer in cock up rather than conspiracy, and opportunism rather than conspiracy. So something arises, and people take opportunity to benefit from it. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, kind of thing. But conspiracy theories have now become an art form. They've become a literary genre, and they sell books and products and services for the people that peddle these conspiracy theories. And some people just do it literally for mischief making. They just want to see people go into impulse and start throwing their fists about on the basis of not knowing anything about what they're talking about. And this is something to be encouraged by these mischief makers. Credulity, of course, you believe anything anyone says to you, especially if it's on the internet. Pseudo-science, look it up. There's a lot of pseudoscience about. It started in the 19th century when people wanted science to prove there was life after death. Aleister Crowley has got a fantastic essay called How Horoscopes Are Faked. If you ever come across that online, which you should be able to, read it. It's absolutely brilliant. I might read it out on my YouTube channel because it's so very, very good and very funny and very witty, and full of very wisdom, a lot of wisdom attached to it. Of course, he was going through his atheistic stage, his Buddhist stage, and pretty much, as far as he was concerned, everybody everybody was peddling snake oil, apart from a very few gifted scientists who are actually talking about things that really exist. Then, of course, there's all the thing about mesmerism and suggestion and autosuggestion, which a lot of conjuring tricks are based on, and a lot of pseudoscience is based on a lot of so-called spiritual healing and New Age stuff is all based on, and including my stuff as well, obviously in that. A placebo effect, of course. This is a genuine effect, but it's like the right answer comes out from the wrong reasoning, from the wrong thinking. But there is definitely an effect on the physiology of the body by believing certain things to be true. And you can use that to medical advantage. So this placebo effect is very interesting. Of course, a lot of scientists don't like the placebo effect because it does sort of call into question a lot of their findings. And perhaps it's the world that they want to see instead of the world as it is. But I don't think this is why you have double-blind tests, of course, and science has already sort of gotten on to the fact that people can be self-deluded, including scientists, you see. Scientists are very humble people, and they recognize that they can be as deluded as anyone, and they can go into magical thinking themselves, you see. This is why you have the empirical method to make sure that you're not thinking magically, and you're not thinking, wanting the world to be as you would like it to be instead of how it actually is, you see. But then, of course, sophism, the biggest sophist mantra at the moment is that science is a belief system, which is only about 30% true, and the rest is all poppycock. And of course, mischief makers get hold of this, and they throw it around, and they justify their mischief making and their conspiracy theories on the basis of a rejection of science. But if you look at science, innovation, and technology, if you look around the room where you are now, and you're using a computer right now to view this YouTube video, you will understand that science is effing real, because there you are, you're completely benefiting from it right now. Innovation, technology, the application of science, pure and applied science, pure and applied mathematics, the empirical method, all of it has actually created this world where you live in paradise compared to how people lived in the 12th century. Let me assure you of that. And you certainly live in a Western paradise at the moment. Even granted, the pandemic will obviously knock the wind out of us for a little bit, but science and innovation technology will bounce back, including economic science, which is also the objective study of economic theory and practice. So it isn't just science as we understand it, there's loads of other sciences as well. And then people will talk about risk. I suppose ever since Mary Shelley wrote the book Frankenstein, she was reflecting the 19th century rejection of science and technology and innovation. I suppose it began with the Luddites who said they were going to be out of work as a result of machines. And of course, there is risk. There is risk for everything. But what we do really is we assess the risk and benefit balance. Because let's face it, the invention of the wheel is a risky thing. The wheel can kill people, the wheel can squash your toe. Maybe we shouldn't have invented the wheel, or if we had invented the wheel, we should have killed the people that made the invention and just stuck to dragging things along, on poles, because the wheel is a risky invention. But the benefit of the invention of the wheel has been huge, so huge, in fact, that I mean, it's probably meant the difference between us human beings being animals and humans being humans, in fact, I would suggest. And there's loads of inventions that have changed the course of history for the species and for the planet. Now, you may say, oh, the planet's in trouble, but the very same innovation, technology, and science, which perhaps has created risk for the ecological system of the planet, is probably the very same discipline that will ensure that its protection. And give reasons why certain ecosystems need to be protected because of the bigger picture. So science also gives the biggest picture, but of course there are risks. The risk, you get out the you go out of your front door, and that's a risk. But you also can't stay indoors all day and do nothing and have no food to eat. So we definitely look at the world as a balance between benefit and risk. And sometimes you can get that balance wrong because scientists and technologists and innovators are human beings too, and sometimes they get the algorithm wrong. There is too much risk and not much benefit. But these things that do have a lot of risk and not much benefit, usually get sort of weeded out in a Darwinian kind of way. I say usually, but not always. And so, of course, people look at one example where the risk has sort of won against the benefit, and then they condemn the whole of science and the whole of technology and the whole of innovation while still actually using it themselves. But a lot of people, as I said, are using conspiracy theories to make mischief. All right, they just want to kick their parents in the shins. They just hate their mummy and daddy, and this is how they get back at mummy and daddy, by being a rebel, and by condemning science as a belief system and having pseudo-science and believing in conspiracy theories, etc., etc. And saying facts are values and that science is a belief system, full stop, like a sort of mantra. And so there we come on to the sort of altogether different thing with meditation. As Dion Fortune said, magic is the art of changing consciousness in conformance with will. So you will to sit down and meditate. You become conscious of your breathing. You go into a calm, relaxed state of mind. You go into a chilled out space. You hear the voice of the silence. And this is the spiritual life. You don't have a problem with science or technology or innovation, but you do stay clear, or you try to stay clear of all magical thinking, because you know that it's a change of consciousness. So you're changing your perspective on the world and on yourself, principally on yourself, through meditation and contemplation, which might be termed, personal philosophy. And you're looking at things rationally and calmly and peaceably, instead of wanting to be a rebel. And you're looking to be constructive rather than destructive. You're looking to be cooperative rather than adversarial. And so we get the spiritual life, and we also contemplate the transcendental. deeply, and we become aware of certain things and certain truths and certain beliefs, obviously, which can't be confirmed or denied, but they are comforting, they are relaxing at the very least. And you know what they say about Reiki? Reiki doesn't claim to do anything apart from relax people, which is all it can claim, because that's all the evidence there is that Reiki can do, and everything else is a claim that's just between you and me, between Reiki practitioner and Reiki person, or Healy, I suppose, and the healer can't make any recommendations and can't make any guarantees that anything will work at all. Um, but certainly you go into a chilled out space where basically matter doesn't matter anymore, if it, in a word. And then you come back from your chilled out space, and you go back into the world refreshed, hopefully, and ready to deal with duality. Now, Aleister Crowley, he still believed in magic with a K, and he recognised that magic with a K has nothing to do with belief, with conspiracy theories and beliefs and sleight of hand and mesmerism and placebo and pseudoscience. He makes that very clear. So you might say, well, what on earth is magic then? Well, magic seems to me to be the art of training the mind to become super sensitive to things that we ordinarily don't detect with our five senses, and don't detect with our five senses, even augmented by telescopes and microscopes and etc. and the empirical method itself, which extends our five senses, and which gives us guarantee that our five senses are not lying to us. And Crowley also wanted to build the brain as a super microscope and a super telescope, in order to extend the power of the five senses, and he makes this very clear. And this is what magic is supposed to be, because it's assumed or posited that apart from this physical universe, there are many other dimensions available to us to access. These dimensions have very little or nothing to do with the material universe, and yet our consciousness, which is admittedly based on the function of the brain, our consciousness is able to become aware of these dimensions, and even to an extent, greater or lesser, to explore these dimensions and perhaps cause changes in these dimensions. Now, of course, Crowley was aware, or perhaps he was not very, very aware, that when you start talking about changes on different levels of dimensions, you've got to be very careful that you don't sort of start saying, well, this means that something can change on the physical level. It may or it may not. And you have to eliminate all possibilities that there is a physical cause to your effect before you start jumping around talking about psychic effects. I actually think that Crowley, unfortunately, being very interested in everything and thinking too much, a bit like me, and taking too many drugs, not like me actually, was prone to belief in magical thinking and conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and gobbledygook, and it kind of polluted a lot of his thinking. But his objective was to develop a pure magic mind that was nothing to do with wishful thinking, but seeing what was actually there. And what was actually there was detected by these magical senses that one could develop through training the mind, and he was not also even going to get into an argument over whether this was brain or soul. It could be brain if you like, but the brain was just becoming more attuned to something which ordinarily it wasn't attuned to, and therefore couldn't detect, you see. So, that being said, I think it's a bit of a murky area, and the problem is that magic can certainly devolve into infantile thinking and magical thinking. And because, you almost sort of have become childlike during the training and the shamanistic practices which attend to magic. And that leaves you vulnerable to actually beginning to think like a child in a non-empirical way. So, of course, Crowley then decided that it was possible to apply empirical methods to magic, which is a very moot point indeed. But even if we accept that, that doesn't mean to say that we have that there's much that we can do with the data that we can gather from our sixth sense or our seventh sense or eighth or ninth sense. We just have a lot of data, and there's not much we can actually do with it because it isn't science, it isn't technology, and it isn't innovation. Or if it is, it's in a sort of hermetically sealed dimension all of its own, and there's nothing much to do with this dimension. But when we think about spirituality, then we're not actually thinking about affecting results at all. We're just in a chilled out, calm space, with our breathing awareness, and we're happy and we're content and we're open, but we're not looking for angels with golden wings. But if an angel with golden wings happens to pop up, then we shall note that. We'll take due notice of it without getting sort of too excited about it. But now we come down to the other categories of human thought, and I've got to speed up here. We look at art. I used to say magic is art. Art just simply is. Art is creativity. Art emerges from the subconscious, they say. But the artist himself or herself has no explanation for art at all. They just do what they do. They sculpt, they write, they make music, they paint, and they make strange modern art, and they do performance art, and they don't know where it comes from, and neither do they care. Art just simply is, and science fiction just simply is as well. And Harry Potter. The world of Harry Potter just is, and the law of Fallout just is. And there's no connection at all to any truth claims about what it might mean for the physical world. Art is art. And then finally we have moral philosophy next. Moral philosophy is the question, what is it right to do? What is the right thing to do? It's the only part of philosophy which is actually left, really, because really when you take philosophy, it's really just semantics, which is just the pursuit of understanding meanings of words and syntax, the meanings of sentences. And basically all the speculation of ontology about whether we exist or whether things exist has all just broken down. And philosophy is mostly semantics, but it does have a moral philosophy, moral side to it, where we use reason to figure out what is the right thing to do, and that works sometimes, and it doesn't work the other times as well, because in fact a lot of people say morality comes from revelation rather than from reasoning. And that basically hasn't been ironed out. The question of whether that is true or not hasn't been answered either very satisfactorily. So we have all this. We have art, which has nothing to do with magical thinking. We have semantics, moral philosophy. We have spirituality, and we have science, technology, and innovation. And they're the sort of goodies. They're on. Well, I say I'm in black and white thinking now as myself. You see, they're on the side of the good, and then we have the bad side, which is the magical thinking, the conspiracy theories, etc. And then we have the sort of ambiguous thing with Crowley's magic. And Crowley wanted to find a middle way. He was a natural Buddhist, and he wanted to find something which kind of united all these different categories of human thinking, but also created a brand new category of human thinking, which he could prove. The proof was in the pudding, really. That if you trained your mind to access magical or occult dimensions, hidden dimensions with your augmented senses, then this would prove simply that these dimensions existed. That's number one. And number two, that they could be accessed and data could be got from them. But the trouble is with magic is that often, as Crowley himself said, it becomes muddled up with magical thinking, with fakery and charlatanism, and it's very hard to discern the difference between the two, as it is between magic and art as well. See, art, magic, and magical thinking and pseudoscience, they all sort of collide together in a kind of murky muddle. And okay, the fringes of science, technology, and innovation also tend to collide with these muddled, murky thinking categories as well, as does spirituality, as does moral philosophy, as does semantics. So sometimes these worlds do collide, they do meet in the middle, and people get jolly confused about which category they're actually on, or in, or fighting for, or defending, you know. So I don't know. The answer basically is to read people's work, try to comprehend it, to try and look at facts as facts, and not be afraid of facts, even if they go against your theories. Try to see people's points of view. Try not to work. Try not to do things on impulse, and try to be educate yourself, and try to work, basically put the effort in to thinking scientifically, or even thinking magically. I mean, it requires work. Anything which doesn't require work, you can begin to think, I don't know about this. This is all too easy. If it's too easy, it probably isn't true. But that's probably the Puritan coming out in me, you know. Because spirituality is incredibly easy. You just have to come aware of your breath and close your eyes and be comfortable, and just go into yourself, and go into silence and become aware of the voice and the silence. You know, but actually that's quite difficult to do that on a regular basis. You might do it once or twice by luck, but if you want to develop your meditation abilities, you've got to work at them as well, you know. And if you've got to work at your art, you've got to work at semantics, you've got to work at moral philosophy, you've got to work at science. You know, the only thing it doesn't require much work is magical thinking, is conspiracy theories, and being a mischief maker. That seems to be it's very easy to be destructive of society and put out loads of lies and innuendo and gossip and everything. You know, and be very, very aware that once you start gossiping and mischief making, and telling lies and spreading lies, it's very, very hard to take these lies back. Number one. Number two, it's very hard to get anyone to ever believe you ever again if you're proved to be wrong. Okay. Which, if you know, make predictions about the end of the world and the end of the world doesn't happen, nobody's going to ever take you seriously ever again. Okay, I'm telling you that right now. So if you're a mischief maker, conspiracy theorist, be aware that people will never believe you again. And then, you see, when you discover a conspiracy which is true, people won't believe you. Okay, and then that could be very serious, both for you and for other people that you're trying to help by exposing a conspiracy theory. But because you've lied so much, no one will ever believe you. Go into what the Hindus call asatya, which is untruth, and you yourself don't know what's true and what isn't true anymore. You're not even an artist, okay? So you don't even have that to fall back. You're living in a kind of shadow world of of make believe and God knows what. And people just think you're mad. But then if you do discover some truth, no one will believe you. And then you've only got yourself to blame for that situation. So the categories of human thinking, there's not so queer as folk, and thou art a bit queer, and me also, I think, a little queer as well. We're all a bit queer, and I don't mean queer. I don't mean queer in the good sense. I mean queer in the jolly bad sense of the word.